Well, good morning. 2 years ago, I was here giving my first stewardship talk. Very uncomfortable in that role. It was, in essence, a story about me. In 2019, I found myself living in Highland Park again. I had been born here 71 years before at the Highland Park Hospital. Was I joyful about being here? No. I was floating. I had found, surprise to me, 5 generations of my mother and aunt's family buried on Deerfield Road. Nobody ever told me that. I knew my grandmother had brothers and sisters there, but I found that it went back to the early 1800s. But having found them, that didn't give me roots. It didn't make me feel like I wasn't floating in a city that I hadn't really lived in for a very, very long time. This church and this congregational family gave me a place to grow roots in Christ and to have a home. God could not be more generous to me than he was then. But in actuality, he is more generous to me every day that I live. So we're now in 2023, and oh my, how things have changed in the world. And I'm now giving a second talk. Somebody else will have to volunteer next year. In the last 2 years, I've learned so much about stewardship. From Pastor Scott, from Walter, from my fellow members on the stewardship committee. I understand now that stewardship is not just making a financial commitment, but my spirited giving to God in response to his loving generosity to me is what stewardship is. As I said, while much has changed in our secular world beyond any of our comprehension, something is changing in our Methodist church. The one thing that I learned when I read the little book on being a Methodist, we're preparing to be led by a new clergy. That is a big change. One night, a couple weeks ago, I woke up at 1 a.m, not unusual for me, absolutely wide awake. And, my dishes were done, the dishwasher was empty, so I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I decided to do something that I had not done for a very long time, and it had bothered me, but I hadn't done anything about it. Decided to read my Bible. I opened my Bible to the book of John and started reading, but I didn't get very far. I was stopped in the first chapter by verse 38. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" Well, that's pretty awesome. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I knew I was giving this talk. This specific Bible is a devotional Bible for women, and that verse had a page written about it, and what the author said was, "It is such a simple question, and yet you know that how you answer that question is going to shape the rest of your days." So I didn't go right back to sleep. And I thought, I want no more than what I have for myself. I had COVID and I was confined to my apartment for a week. And I kind of got the revelation that you don't need anything more, Marj. And I knew that God had been so gracious to me in finding this church and being part of it. So I kind of ended up doing some calculations. That's the other side of me you don't see very often, the physicist side. If a new generation is created every 30 years, This place of God is currently working on its fourth or fifth generation since 1909. It's actually in the cover of our church. And late that night, I answered Christ's question to me, "What do you want, Marge?" And what I want is our church to be able to nurture at least 4 more generations, some of which I hope, if someone did a DNA analysis 4 generations from now, say, gee, that person's related to Marj Passini. But back to stewardship. We can't expect to seed future generations by our activities unless we here today can close our budget gap of $36,000. If you think about, we've been here 4 or 5 generations in this church, and we want to seed 4 more generations, that is not much money at all. 4 generations from now, inflation will have caught up with this, and who knows? I didn't do that calculation. My grandson can probably do it on his calculator. But if we can close that gap, then we can, as a committed congregation, with our incredible strategic plan, which Pastor Scott is leaving with us, and we focus on becoming more welcoming, loving place to experience Christ's love. And hopefully we'll be able to bring children into our service as we are today. Closing our budget gap with our pledges isn't matching what others give. Doesn't matter what others give. It is matching our giving, our pledge gift to God in response to his loving generosity to each of us. For me, this generosity keeps a smile on my face. Years ago, I was a manager, and a gentleman who was working for me was asked to describe me to his wife because we were all going on a meeting. He said, "Well, I don't know what to say, but she always smiles." And thus, my pledge must increase. Whatever I gave last year is not sufficient for this year. And if I want to move ahead for 4 more generations, I have to do my part. None of it will be easy for any of us because the world out there is really working very hard to make our financial comfort difficult. But if I lose my smile, all I have to do is look at the penitent woman who's in the middle frame right there and feel as she feels the touch of Christ on my cheek. We need to make possible many more to feel that touch of Christ sitting here in this sanctuary. We can only do that if we prayerfully consider what we can sacrifice for our church, so this church will be full of our descendants 4 generations from now. Thank you.